The first scripture reading is from Psalm 98, and it's a song psalm. We will be singing refrain 1. JP will play through once for us, and then we will practice once and move into the psalm. Sing to God a new song. Sorry. Your right hand and your holy arm have brought victory. You have made known your salvation and revealed before the nations your saving power. You have remembered your steadfast love and faithfulness to the house of Israel. All the ends of the earth have seen the salvation of our God. Make a joyful noise to God, all the earth. Break into joyous praise, sing psalms. Sing psalms to God with the harp and melodious voice, with trumpets and the sound of the horn. Make a joyful noise before our sovereign God.
The gospel reading comes to us from Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 to 12. And this section is known as the Sermon on the Mount. And here begins the reading. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain. And after he sat down, the disciples came to him. And he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way, they persecuted the prophets who were before you." Herein is the good news. Thanks be to God. For the first time in my life, I went to the Philippines earlier this year in May, and my eyes were opened. I didn't really know what to expect. Actually, I went to a high school in Scarborough, not too far from here, with lots of Filipino students. I remember the guys had really good hair and they wore tight designer jeans. The Filipina girls were beautiful and stylish. There was even one student who actually became Miss Philippines, and she entered the Miss Universe pageant. I was secretly excited about going to the land of beautiful people. Instead, it turned out to be the land of exploited people. The National Council of Churches in the Philippines staff told us about its colonial history. We were told the Philippines was colonized by Spain for 333 years. Then the Americans began to colonize them in 1898 following the Spanish-American War. Then during World War II, the Japanese. And now what I saw was modern office buildings and beautiful shopping malls and abject poverty. People were living in corrugated steel homes. It looked like the so-called third world. I wasn't prepared to face all of it, not at once. Truly sadly, we were also told that many high school graduates are functionally illiterate. They struggle to analyze what they read. It keeps them unaware, docile, and easily manipulated. Furthermore, about 6,000 people leave the Philippines every day for better opportunities elsewhere while providing cheap labor supply for other countries. What struck me was this: the country is still being colonized by their own people who control the economy. They run the businesses, the industries, the politics. The elite families are exploiting their own people. But so are the international mining companies, many of them Canadian. There are the military of the world, including Canada, taking advantage of the fact that Philippines sits on the South China Sea. It helps to contain China using the Philippines as their base. We were taken up to a city called Baguio in a beautiful mountainous region up north in the Cordillera province. The only problem? Our van driver drove us around like a race car driver, around sharp corners and hairpin turns. And I sat there clutching a barf bag, desperately trying to keep my breakfast down. It was a tough trip, I kid you not. And what I saw was even harder. We arrived at a large-scale gold mining operation. It had created a massive pit lake filled with cyanide. We were told that this land had been mined by indigenous people for hundreds of years, and they also grew rice there. Now, the same land holds poison. In another mining community, an international company had moved in. They displaced local miners, they damaged the environment, and the locals who ended up working for them, they faced broken relationships in their own communities. They told us we learned to be civil with them. I took some photos and posted them on Facebook. Folks in Canada found them interesting and informative. But our partners from the NCCP noticed my posts. They said, "Don't post anything until you're back in Canada. It can be dangerous for you." That sent chills down my spine. Back in Manila, we visited a group called Rise Up for Life and Rights. It was in a poor part of the city. We met a group of women who had lost their family members. Sons, husbands, and even grandchildren to Rodrigo Duterte's so-called war on drugs. I say so-called because it wasn't real war on drugs. Duterte didn't go after the crime syndicates who control the drug trade. He went after the poor. Plainclothes police showed up in people's homes and shot people. Even if they had used drugs, they still deserved a trial and due process. Instead, they were killed. Some were innocent, even children not. As the women told their stories, many of them still cried. And here's what was chilling. When the shootings happened, ambulance was already parked nearby. They took the bodies, destroying the crime scenes. The dead bodies were eventually taken to the same funeral home. It was all a racket between the police, ambulance company, and the funeral home. Police were even rewarded for how many people they killed. After the killing, the women said they were vilified and ostracized in their own community. The children were bullied at school, forcing them to change schools. The social media crowd accused them of spreading fake news. I sat there listening to the women, and I struggled to find the words. Eventually I said, "Jesus, on the Sermon on the Mount said, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." But I'll be honest, even after 30 years of ministry, that passage is still hard for me to understand. It is helpful to remember who Jesus was speaking to. He was not talking to the political elites in Jerusalem, not the business leaders, not the landowners, not the temple priests. He was speaking to the poor, the ordinary people by the Sea of Galilee. That's why he also said, "Blessed are the poor, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And let's remember the context. At the time, Israel was occupied by the Roman Empire. There was martial law. The most powerful army in the world controlled everything. So yes, you would be sad. You would mourn what your country had become. You would mourn the fact that your leaders were collaborating with the enemy, helping them to run the country and collecting taxes for them. You would mourn the loss of freedom, the loss of dignity, the loss of hope. And I ask, if you're not mourning, what does that say about you? Why aren't you mourning? Is your life so good, so sheltered, so separated from your own people that you have no need for grief? Jesus did not say, "Blessed are those who are wealthy, beautiful, and powerful." Rather, he said, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." The picture of this person, he's a indigenous leader, and he has been red tagged, and police, they have shoot to kill orders on him. When I came back from the Philippines, I felt incredibly sad, and it took me a while to figure out why. I was sad and angry at the way the innocent people were treated, and at the poverty, at the repression of human rights activists, clergy, indigenous leaders, journalists, and lawyers. Many have been red tagged, meaning they were deemed communists and terrorists. Some had their bank accounts frozen. Some were killed extrajudiciously. And then I realized I was mourning. And maybe I was feeling what I may humbly call divine sadness. This echoes back to Mount Sinai, where God said to Moses, "I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings." There's a grief that comes from seeing the world through God's eyes while sharing in the suffering with others. There's a word for that, compassion, which in Latin means to suffer with. I also remember a very evocative post-communion prayer where we say, "May your presence among us provoke such a longing for your realm that we will never be satisfied until the whole earth knows your justice, your peace, and your love." Someone said, "Be careful what you pray for. It just might come true." But where was my comfort? Well, it came in unexpected ways. I happened to be listening to classical music, a piece I had heard before, but in that moment of mourning and sadness, I really heard it. It was beautiful. It touched something deep in my soul. I also found comfort in my colleagues. My boss, Wendy Gichru, noticed something was off. She was kind. She invited me for a conversation, and I told her about all that I felt and experienced. And I also told what Angie said about my sadness. And she said, "Isn't that why your unit exists? Isn't that why you do your job?" And my boss replied, "Your wife is a genius." And I replied, "Well, I'm not going to tell her that." And we both laughed. Poet Khalil Gibran said, "Your joy is your sorrow unmasked." And the self-same well from which your laughter rises was oftentimes filled with your tears. How else can it be? The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. Certainly, I am longing for joy to give some comfort to my sadness, but there is something more. Lyra Watson, the Aboriginal leader of Australia, knew of something of this as she said, "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together." In my sadness and a desire for healing, the path forward lay in working towards liberation, peace, and justice. When we asked the people we met, the Rise Up for Life and Rights community, the fisher folks, the farmers, the miners, what can the United Church of Canada do for you? Remarkably, they all said the same thing. Please tell our stories. One of the people helping tell those stories is a deaconess named Norma Dolaga in the Philippines. She brought the grieving women together, offered them support, and she started the Rise Up for Life and Rights community. She helped to document the violence. She helped provide economic and psychological support. She also helped the women testify before Philippines Congress and even before the UN Special Rapporteur. Their witness was so powerful that the International Criminal Court took notice. Furthermore, when the International Criminal Court took them seriously, it finally gave the women validation after all the vilification, ostracization, and social media attacks. And now, Rodrigo Duterte is sitting in a jail cell in The Hague waiting trial because of the courage of these women, because of people like Norma. And thanks to your Mission and Service Fund donations, you have also helped to support the Rise Up community. And in 2024, Norma was awarded the World Methodist Peace Award. Blessed are those who mourn, Jesus said. I am now understanding this from a mother who had given birth to a severely disabled daughter. When her daughter was born, she said she cried so much over her daughter that she could have drowned her baby with all her tears. She, however, responded the only way a mother could, the only way she could, with love. It took every ounce of energy and more to care for her daughter. She felt exhausted all the time. Because of her daughter, she said, she had been transformed. She learned the meaning of unconditional love, and she became an incredibly loving person. Though initially she thought her daughter was a curse, but now she says her daughter became a true blessing who helped her to become a truly loving person. So for me, she solved the mystery of Jesus' teaching, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. The sadness I am feeling initially felt like an occupational hazard, but now it seems more like a rite of passage to use the sadness to act with compassion, to advocate, and to stand in prophetic solidarity. As it turns out, Philippines was not the land of beautiful people that I had secretly hoped. Rather, it is the land of courageous people struggling for justice, a land of faithful people living out their faith with authenticity, and a land where people are actively working for peace. It is they who are inspiring me and who are giving me the strength to journey on, to work with them. Please pray for those who mourn, for the people in the Philippines, in Gaza, in Ukraine, and other parts of the world. And please also pray for those who work in prophetic solidarity with those who mourn as well. And in so doing, our hearts will be aligned with the will of God in solidarity, in peace, and in justice. Thanks be to God.